everybody. This is Dana Lopez, the Director of Marketing and Communications for The Inn. And this is a very, very special episode of In Gratitude, our podcast. As some of you may know, The Inn is celebrating its 40th anniversary in 2023. And I thought it was a really great opportunity to bring back the very first guests of our first ever podcast back in 2021. In 2021, around February, we did our very first podcast and we welcomed Jean Kelly, the executive director of The Inn, and Rob Kammerer, who is one of our members of the board of directors, but was also one of the original volunteers at the original Inn back in 1983. So I just want to say hello, Jean, and hello, Rob. How are you today?
We're
Hi,
great.
Dana. Happy to be here with you.
Happy to be here. Thank
you so much. And we had so much fun the last time we spoke. Now, that was in 2021, and it was our 38th anniversary, but 40 is a big milestone. The first week of February 1st, 1983, was the very first meeting ever of the volunteers that came together and wanted to open the first soup kitchen in Nassau County. Can you just briefly take us back to that day?
It was a nighttime meeting. I think it was at 7 o'clock. It was in a house in Uniondale in any neighborhood. So I'd never been there before, and it was a bunch of strangers basically all coming together answering an ad that they had seen in the paper. We walked into the building, the room, and all of a sudden there was a mission. There was a desire to make something happen, and everybody there decided how they could help. Ironically, I couldn't help because I didn't know the soup kitchen was open only during the day because I was working during the day, but I was asked to be the temporary volunteer chairperson. So 40 years later, I'm still waiting for the real one to show up. And thanks to that job, I got to meet Rob, and I got to, spend the rest of my life with him. So it's been a wonderful journey.
That is wonderful. Rob, now you weren't at that particular meeting, but I know that Jean called you or called somebody that thought was you or thought was someone else. What was your take on learning about what this plan was for the soup kitchen and how you personally got involved?
Well, I think I'm an altruistic person, but at that time I was, I guess, all talk and no action. And my friends would tease me mercilessly, well, why don't you do something? And when I heard about the Inn at another meeting, I put my name on a list because I really wanted to pitch in and help. I felt fortunate, and people who feel fortunate and are fortunate should always help. And then I got a call from Jean. She left a message, which I ignored basically. Then I got another call from Jean, which I again ignored, not on purpose. And then finally I got a call from Jean saying, we'll see you next Tuesday. And I'm thinking, holy cow, I didn't even say I could come. And now she's had me down coming. So I had to call her back and say, gee, I'm going to be in school teaching. I can't be there. But I did make an appointment or a date when I would start volunteering, and I love being with the Inn from the very first minute.
You met that first year in 1983, and I know this isn't, it just happens to be around Valentine's Day. There's love in the air, and I know this isn't, this is definitely a big part of our history, but the two of you married. How long after that first meeting did you get married?
Jean?
We started going out in the end of May, Memorial Day weekend, and we got engaged in October, and we got married the following April of 1984.
Wow, it's a beautiful story, and I don't get tired of hearing it. So thank you for sharing.
We were the first Inn couple, which was an honor to have.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Jean, I've heard you speak in the last couple of weeks leading up to our celebrations for the 40th anniversary. And one thing that I noticed is all of the major happenings, either in the world or, in the country or even just in our little community that have happened over the years what are some of the major things that you feel the inn has had to go through?
Yes, I guess the first one was very early on. We had only started in 1983 serving, and by 1984, we found that a number of the guests tragically were not housed besides being hungry. And so we opened our first emergency shelter in 1984. And very soon thereafter, between 84 and 85, is when AIDS arrived, and no one knew what it was. And it was a very, very frightening time because no one knew how you could get it. It was lethal. It happened very quickly once you got the disease, and everyone was disconnecting from family members who even had it out of fear. And some of those people became homeless, and we actually had to open a special shelter for people with AIDS. And really, it was just accompanying them through their final months and weeks of life. It was very, very tragic times, but it was very encouraging and inspirational how the end did not back off and just said, we have to help people who are in this situation. So we helped quite over 120 something people, I believe, were helped during that period of time. And we connected them with their families, and even made videotapes of them speaking to their families for those who weren't able to speak with them directly. And we did the best we could, and we came through it. So it seems like 100 years ago, and yet it wasn't that long ago. It was less than 40 years.
Rob, do you have any memories of major occurrences in history that affected the inn?
But things that stand out to me. Well, one is, and it's a very positive thing, how generous people are. I remember one time, I forget the year, but we were preparing for the Innkeeper's Ball, which is our major fundraising event each year. And I was talking to one of the people on the committee, and she said, "Did you hear about the bombing in Oklahoma City?" And I said, "No." And this is when the federal building in Oklahoma City was bombed. And when I saw and heard of that, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I guess everybody's going to be donating their money to Oklahoma City, and the inn and the Innkeeper's Ball will have a problem with donations. But I was so impressed. People were just as generous as ever. And I say that to this day.
And of course, the recent pandemic. I feel like now that we're in essence post-pandemic, we've seen the same thing. It just seems like it just keeps going around, sort of a cycle of giving and compassion from donors, and appreciation from the guests. It seems like the more things change, the more they stay the same, I feel like.
There's a continuity of the kindness towards strangers. And when you think of it, it's even the guests feel we're strangers technically to them, and yet they're kind back to us and receiving what they need. And we likewise are extending that respect and compassion for their situation. So, but it's continuity of that kindness towards a stranger.
Our philosophy, the inn's philosophy of serving hungry and homeless Long Islanders with dignity, respect, and love. I understand that that's been the philosophy since day one. How did that come up? How did it come to that specifically? I know that everybody there were compassionate and they wanted to help, but how did you come down to that? The basic. It's really what the inn stands for from the moment it began.
It's really an outpouring of the intention of everyone in that first room on February 1st, 1983, that they didn't want to be involved with any effort unless the people who were going to receive the services were going to be treated with respect and in a dignified way. And I think some of them were older to begin with at the time. A lot of them have since passed on. And at the time, I remember them remembering what they had heard about the Depression, how people were spoken to or looked down upon. And they felt very strongly that it was hard enough to be in that position without being made to feel like they were less than anyone else. That was just a given that everybody agreed on, and then the rest execution of trying to get the job done. And when you think of it, it was pretty miraculous for a grassroots organization to meet on February 1st and open the first soup kitchen in Nassau County 3 months later on May 2nd, with no funds, no government funds. It was literally just finding a place, getting people to donate, and all volunteers showing up. It is a miracle in a way that it did happen that way, but now it's continuing this many years later and on such a higher level of scale because of people's awareness and lack of fear about that anybody coming to eat could be any one of us. We're only serving ourselves.
I want to talk a little bit about some of those key players from the beginning, specifically Pat O'Connor and Mike Moran, the two co-founders of the Inn. And we've talked about them in the past, and we have some video of them talking about the early days. But we were so happy to welcome them back recently. And if you're listening to this or watching this and don't know that we've expanded in such incredible ways since the pandemic, with renovations and a new building and some wonderful new expanded programs. Rob, Jean, can you talk a little bit about Mike and Pat and how they never left, really. They've always been around. They've always been supportive. And recently they came back and saw this major expansion. What was their reaction?
I think it's hard for them to believe about the expansion, because when you start something small, grassrootsy, you never can dream of what's going to come to be. I think they were a perfect team where, I guess in comedy, there's the comic and the straight person. They had no egos at all. You know, if News 12 or News 4 was coming to the Inn, they would say, "Hey, do you want to do it? I'm busy working on this or that." You know, they didn't say, "Well, it has to be me." It was really, I'm impressed with that. They were so egoless.
I've spoken to Pat a number of times. Mike is traveling back to California right now, where he lives part of the year. And, I know he wrote us a lovely note saying that it was, the most special time of his whole life was being part of the Inn and getting it started, but that coming to see that he feels he planted the seed and we grew it the rest of the way, was very touching for him, and certainly inspiring for us to know that he's so impressed and pleased with the caliber of the people who are there working, that he met the staff as well as the volunteers, that the spirit is still alive, and it's the same spirit that was here when he started it the first 10 years that he was here, and that it kind of makes his own life, I think, feel very rewarding on top of everything else he's done, that this is a legacy that he left behind.
As both of you started out as volunteers, and the Inn is a volunteer-based organization, and it always has been, what do you think are the main or most important characteristics of an Inn volunteer?
I think I've heard this from Jean Victor multiple times. Jean Victor, the manager at the Mary Brennan. You have to be totally flexible. You can't walk in the door thinking, well, today I'm going to be serving the main entree. No, if Jean Victor needs you to sweep the parking lot, you have to smile and be a good sport about it. I remember volunteering and I'm cleaning out the bathroom. I was happy about it. I mean, you just have to walk in the door, be flexible. Don't expect anything from the guests. Don't be thinking, well, I mean, I came here, I cooked for 3 hours, I'm serving them a meal. Now, most of them do say thank you, but if someone doesn't say thank you, you're not there to hear thank yous. You're not there to hear people say, "Oh, you're so wonderful, volunteer." No, you're there to serve, so you can't have any expectations from the guests. But you have to give to them, and the best. And Jean always says this: you have to give them a smile, because a smile is a tremendous fuel for anybody. So you also have to give them a smile, and you have to be friendly with your other volunteers, not necessarily talkative, but you have to be friendly with the other volunteers because it's a real group activity.
I feel we're all here to be of service, and not everyone is really cut out to do this kind of work because it's so difficult. But this type of service, when you're providing a basic need for someone, is, in my opinion, it's the Mount Everest of service. There's nothing higher you can do for someone on this earth other than helping them stay alive. But just like climbing Mount Everest, you need special equipment, you need oxygen, you can't stay up there. It's very, very difficult, strenuous volunteer work and staff work as well. And you have to be careful that when you go up, that you're prepared, and that you don't stay a long time without taking a rest and coming back. But I believe that people who are trapped in poverty are stuck at the top of Mount Everest, and our job is to take them down with us each time we come down, to help them not have to live in those conditions, and that one day, hopefully, no one will have to go up to Mount Everest.
Thank you, Jean. It's interesting. My last question was going to be, what's your vision for the future? But I think you just answered it as far as your last your last answer about not having to go to Mount Everest. I think that really sums it up. Well, it's important to know that we have such a strong foundation in the two of you from having upheld that philosophy for so long. And I think that all of us that come in understand and agree with it and are passionate about it. So thank you for keeping up that this amazing philosophy for this wonderful organization that has done so much in what in essence is a very short period of time. So happy 40th anniversary.
Thank you so much, Dana.
So much.
Thank you so much. And just, we just wish for all the best for all the guests that come through the inn now and in the future.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Yep.